Hello again and welcome to the home stretch of your implementation training. Thank you for bearing with me. We will now move on to the data collection spreadsheet. So we'll go back into our folder and open up DICE Data Reporting. As you can see on this spreadsheet, you will find 7 categories to fill out. The date of the visit, the caregiver ID number, the travel time to and from the caregivers, the number of hours implementing DICE, the caregiver support services and referrals, whether or not the caregiver accepted those referrals, and the notes section. I will briefly go through each of these sections and will show you an example at the end of how this spreadsheet could look once completed. So first, at the top of your spreadsheet, you will want to put in your name and your professional ID number if you know it. Otherwise, we have that information for you and can add it in there for you. But we will at least need your name. And then again, that is your name, not the caregiver's name. The date of the visit, it is just that, the date you visited or spoke with the caregiver about anything pertaining to DICE or the caregiver support services, which I will discuss in a second. For instance, if you saw a caregiver on October 19th in person, you would put that data in one of these rows. If you then spoke with them today on the phone about DICE, you would put today's date in another row. For each caregiver interaction involving DICE, you will put that information here. The caregiver ID number. As I stated in the previous recording, when you first complete these spreadsheets, you will include the caregiver ID number you created along with your professional ID number, just like you did on the DICE worksheet. Again, we assigned your professional ID number when you came to the training, but do not worry if you do not remember it, as we have that number in our office. Remember that on all paperwork and reporting you do, keep using the same ID number you created for the caregiver. For example, if caregiver Mary Smith has the number CG05 that you assigned to her, that caregiver number will always stay with Mary, and it would go on the DICE worksheet you used with her as well as this data spreadsheet. Next are the columns for number of hours traveled to and from the caregiver's home, and the number of hours implementing DICE, talking about caregiver support services or anything related to DICE. For the hours, please report these in quarter increments of time. For example, 0.25 for 15 minutes, 0.5 for half an hour, 0.75 for 3/4 of an hour, and 1.0 for a full hour. Use your best estimate if you are not sure of the time. Please be honest, but we are not double checking with your supervisors or the caregivers, obviously, on how long you were there. Also, remember to record the travel time amount, not the number of hours. Next, there is the column for the caregiver support services. To address the need to support caregivers and reduce their stress and burden, these are some identified resources we want you to refer caregivers to. More importantly, our funding officers require us to identify evidence-based programs that caregivers can take part in. For the purposes of our grant in these requirements, we have identified Powerful Tools for Caregivers and Memory Care Connections as the evidence-based programs, so we highly encourage you to refer caregivers to these resources. If these do not exist in your area or you do not provide them, that is fine. We just ask that you let us know, or by noting it in the notes column. And we'd ask that you refer caregivers to other resources that do exist in your area, such as respite services, dementia resources and supports, adult day centers, or other dementia care programs. If you indicate that the caregiver was offered and accepted any one of these resources or services, we will request a signed release of information to follow up with those agencies to verify they enrolled and completed the service. Again, our funding officers require us to verify that caregivers were not only referred, but that they took part and completed the evidence-based programs. We do not need to verify the use of respite or these other resources. So this is the column where you will indicate if they accept it or not. Lastly, the notes section is just for that. Any notes you want to add or let us know about. For instance, this is where you can state that Powerful Tools for Caregivers or Memory Care Connections does not exist in your area. Or you can briefly note why the caregiver has refused any particular resource you offered. You can also note in here that if a caregiver accepted a caregiver resource or referral, but they refused to sign the release of information for us to verify that, you can explain why in this notes section. Lastly, this data collection spreadsheet and a copy of the DICE worksheet, which we discussed in the last video segment, will need to be submitted to me by the end of the first full week of the following month. For example, if you started doing DICE today, you should submit this form to me by Friday, November 10th. If you started doing DICE in November, you would submit the information by Friday, December 8th. Now, having said that, this is our preferred time to receive this information. However, we recognize that many of you have other very important deadlines that fall around this time frame. We are flexible and can work with you to have the information submitted on another date, either shortly before or shortly after the dates I listed above. If you have any questions about this, let's chat. It should not be a deterrent to your participation. Finally, let's take a look at the example spreadsheet I created. So I'm going to open up this example here. As you can see, each of these columns are completed with the information that is needed in them. Again, for the hours, please report these in quarter increments of time and use your best estimate if you are not sure. At the top, you will put your name, so I have put my name up here, and your professional ID number if you know it, or we will add it in there for you. As you can see in the date of the visits, I've put in different dates for the interactions I've had with the caregiver involving DICE. I've added the caregiver ID number I've assigned to them, so I saw caregiver 05 on 3 different dates, and then caregiver 17 and caregiver 2. Then there is the travel time. And again, this is to and from. So in these examples, I have 0.5. I have a half hour of total travel time, meaning it was 15 minutes or 0.25 approximately each way. And down here, it was 0.75 total. In this column, I met with them or spoke with them for an hour and a half, and that was pertaining to DICE. It was an hour here. On October 10th, this third row, I only spoke with them for 0.25, for about 15 minutes. So maybe I spent the rest of that visit talking about other things that were not related to DICE in any way. So let's say this 0.25 was spent just talking briefly about some caregiver support services and programs that might be beneficial to them, such as Stepping On and Powerful Tools for Caregivers. So with that, I want to take a look at specifically the first visit and the second visit and what I have noted. So in this first visit, we talked about DICE. We didn't get to talking about caregiver support services, so I didn't discuss that, didn't make a referral on that first visit. Because we didn't talk about it and I didn't make a referral, it's not applicable that they accepted or denied. And I didn't have any notes to put. However, on the second visit, which is October 5th, we did talk about ADC, Adult Day Centers. I made the referral or talked to the caregiver about making a referral. They refused. They said no. In the notes section, I added why. The caregiver had poor experiences in the past with adult day center situations. Now, this information will be important for us to know so that during our consultation time with you over the phone, which I will explain further in your final training segment, this is helpful for me to know so we can talk more about what the caregiver's experiences were, why she refused, and maybe brainstorm other possible resources that would be a good match for her. Next, let's look at the example of where I discussed and offered the Stepping On program and powerful tools for caregivers to Caregiver 05. So that would be on this date, October 10th, Caregiver 05 again, at my travel time. This is where we just briefly talked about the caregiver support services, which were Stepping On and powerful tools. So I gave the caregiver the information and referral. Did the caregiver accept? Yes, she did. However, I noted the caregiver was excited about the programs, but did not want to sign a release of information to verify enrollment. This is again where it would be important to assure the caregiver that their information will be kept confidential, and we only use the information to verify that they completed the course for the purposes of our grant requirements, and their information will be destroyed at the end of the project. This is also an important piece of information for us to know, so when we consult with you, we can talk about how to let the caregiver know the reasons why we are verifying their enrollment and completion. Lastly, this helps us when we report back to our funding officers. We can say that X number of caregivers received DICE, X number were referred to these evidence-based programs, a certain number accepted, however, only a certain number allowed us to verify their enrollment and completion. And then we have the reasons why that we can report back to them. So in summary, the note section is important, particularly in letting us know why a caregiver refused any services. And lastly, I just want to point out an example down here as well. October 19th, caregiver 2, 0.75 for travel time, hour and a half visit talking about DICE. Referrals were not made, so therefore the caregiver could not accept nor deny. However, powerful tools for caregivers was discussed with the client, but they are not available in my county and the next location is too far. Again, this is helpful for us to know, so when we consult, we can talk about other possible services that would be available. So that's the brief example of how to complete the data collection spreadsheet, and it concludes the data collection requirements. So you can move ahead to video number 6, the final recording about consultations.